Welcome back to Full Circle Florida. Let's talk about the battle for this once battleground state. Florida has undergone a political transformation since the dawn of this decade. Republicans now currently maintain nearly a 1 million registered voter lead over Democrats. But there's still nearly 3.5 million independent voters in this state who are theoretically up for grabs. So, is Florida really in play? Well, the answer may lie less in the big national and state races and more in the local races, from the school board to the county commission. This week, I spoke with Axios reporter Yacob Reyes about Florida's shifting political landscape, plus the power of the governor's veto pen and that $6 billion deal that could lift the city of St. Pete to new heights if it ever gets done. I really like how you guys break things down because the articles are easy to read, they're easy to absorb, and something we don't hear enough about, but it has major consequences, the local county elections from the school board, which has been hotly contested in counties all over the state of Florida the last few years. So the candidates for these elections are now set. What are the key takeaways that you're finding out?
Yeah, I think one key takeaway is that Democrats were able to field a candidate in every legislative race. So that means
that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
For them.
Yes, it hasn't been done in like 30 years. All incumbents, right, are going to have to campaign. And so Tampa Bay is going to be very interesting this election cycle. In Hillsborough and Pinellas, election administration officials have drawn challengers who are election integrity skeptics. And so that's a pretty big deal there too.
Supervisor of elections you're talking about?
Yes.
And what about like the county commission races? Because I don't think a lot of people know who their commissioners are and how much influence they have directly on their actual neighborhood.
Yeah, the Board of County Commissioner leads over 1.4 million people, right? They make all the decisions about land variance, about land use, and also about affordable housing. So they touch every aspect of our daily lives.
Are you seeing just a little shimmer of like hope for the Democratic Party, the fact that they fielded candidates, that every one of these seats, statewide is going to be a challenge, that Republican candidates can't take it for granted? Or are they still at a major logistical disadvantage, and it kind of shows you how far they've fallen behind the Republican Party?
Yeah, I think if we look at history, right, in the 90s, Republicans had a voter registration deficit. They were in minorities, right? But then at the end of that decade, they were able to make some pretty significant gains that Democrats have been unable to claw back. Now, Democrats have been unable to do this feat, to fill every seat, to contest every single seat in over 30 years. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm that I'm hearing from a lot of party officials.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to run, it's another thing to win, right? And so you'll have to see what the results are. Meanwhile, Axios doing some new reporting on the power of the governor's veto pen. We saw how that played out here with the budget. Governor DeSantis crossed out a nearly $1 billion worth of funding from the budget. He called some of these projects unnecessary and said, look, I'm just being fiscally responsible here when it comes to the taxpayers' money. Some of these were supposed to happen in Tampa Bay. What did you find out about what was nixed?
Yeah, I mean, everything, right? Like everything from transportation to environmental, and even some programs to combat opioid use statewide. And so Bradenton had the largest cut of about $5 million for transportation safety improvements. So they were going to put roundabouts in these locations that had a lot of crashes. So that was a big one. And also DeSantis cut out 2 grants for arts and culture. So now you're having the Tampa Museum of Art scrambling to find these funds.
What does he gain by doing that? I mean, is he trying to project himself as, look, I'm not going to be careless with your money? Or he had this big press conference. He seemed pretty proud of it.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to remember who DeSantis was before he became our governor, right? And so in Congress, he was part of the Freedom Caucus, which at the time was like championing how fiscally conservative they were.
Yeah.
So I think DeSantis sees this as a point of pride, and he's certainly done this before, even with legislative leaders, like cutting all of their projects right in front of them. So he takes a big pride in doing that.
Well, it's certainly a power play because it's a reminder that, hey, I have the final say on a lot of this stuff, and money is power in Tallahassee. All right, the ongoing soap opera that is part of my childhood, the Reyes Stadium deal, the new, that's supposed to keep them here in Tampa Bay. I thought this thing was going to be a sure thing when they announced it last year, but it seems like it's a situation where perfect is the enemy of good. Are they about to mess this thing up, or is this finally going to cross the finish line at some point and they're going to break ground on a new ballpark?
Yeah, so the St. Pete City Council, they did move the ball forward here. June 14th, they gave initial approval, right, to a plan. It still requires one more vote, which they're going to open up in July 11th. And so 3 members voted against this agreement, and their big complaint was that the documents they were reviewing weren't final. So but it still passed.
They want some promises in writing.
Exactly.
This time around. They want to make sure the deal is good for everyone. But it would seem to me that the future of St. Petersburg, which by all appearances seemed to be very bright, hinges on this deal happening. That if this actually goes through, there's a lot of people that think St. Petersburg is going to double in size. It is going to maybe even outshine Tampa, that it's going to change that city forever.
Some people would argue that St. Pete already outshines Tampa in a lot of ways.
True.
But I think what we're seeing here is that when a city grows, when a city becomes big, right, and this deal is a big part of that, there are people left behind. And I think that's where some of the residents have concern, right? Whether or not they're going to be taxed out of like being able to afford living in St. Pete, and whether or not this impacts minority communities. But all in all, I mean, Axios has done a poll as well, right? A little reader service poll, but most people do agree with this plan, so it seems like it might move forward.
Right. They want certain things to be agreed upon. They want it in writing. They want it done right, because once you move forward, it would appear that you can't redo the deal once the deal is done.
Exactly.
All right. Yacob Reyes, thank you for coming here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Come by anytime. Thank you. All right, back here with our panel, Dr. Susan McManus and Joshua Scacco. I want to get back to this idea that Florida is in play. Nikki Fried, the state leader of the Democratic Party, and it's her job. I mean, you get it. That's what she's got to do. She's saying the Democratic Party has been trying to make the case that Democrats are going to become more competitive in this election cycle, and perhaps they will be. But then this week you had the Biden campaign chair who said that Florida is not a state Democrats are taking seriously, as in throwing money to, buying ads, that kind of thing. Which is it?
Well, Florida is clearly registration-wise trending Republican. And the performance by Biden at the debate caused the Miami Herald to write an editorial about the real fallout for Biden's performance was the potential election of some South Florida Democrats that they were hopeful could win.
Down ballot. This affects everyone.
Yes.
So it's not just a Biden discussion. Now it becomes the person who's running for this state seat or that state seat who has a D next to their name.
2022, I think, showed that the Democratic Party can't disengage in Florida for obvious reasons. Republicans won a supermajority in the state legislature. They lost a number of competitive counties in terms of commissions and things. So the down ballot matters here. The other key thing is there's a lot of money in Florida for the Biden campaign. It might not be competitive, but they can raise money here. So being able to say that at least the state is somewhat competitive is very important. So these mixed messages don't necessarily do the Biden campaign any good, either down ballot or with trying to raise money here.
And Susan, you just mentioned it, Republicans in Florida, according to the latest numbers, nearly 1 million registered voter lead over Democrats, but independents still account for about 3.5 million voters. So is it not mathematically possible to see some blue upsets on the ballot, despite the debate performance from Biden?
It would depend almost exclusively on millennials and Gen Zers, who make up 34% of our current registered voters. They're the independents. There are no party affiliation. A plurality of them are not registered with either party. And it would be up to them to sort of lean in one direction or another. But historically in Florida, if you say independent, it can mean a lot of different things, and not just one group that could be cohesive as one group.
Well, you take yourself out of the primary voting, that's for sure. That's why a lot of people don't do it anymore, because they want to have a say in the primaries.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats missed an opportunity there in terms of the primary to be able to organize in a way around the presidential election, to be able to identify supporters. So unless they have some other way of doing it, they've missed a number of prime opportunities here in Florida to really hit the ground running.
All right, guys, thank you so much for helping me sort through all of this week. Appreciate it. And Full Circle Florida continues right after this.